What's up guys, the Strong Boys 19 here. This is going to be another album review for a new 2021 album, and I'm going to be reviewing the latest album from legendary, very iconic and very influential heavy metal titans Iron Maiden, entitled Senjutsu, making this the first album since the Book of Souls in more than 5 years. Kevin Shirley has done the production and the mixing, as well as Steve Harris has done the co-production for this album. Now, I was very much anticipated to hear what Iron Maiden can really put out in their massive amount of ability and new arrangements of music. And as a follow-up to the Book of Souls, which was an album that I really like very much, and actually marked that album as my favorite record of 2015, I was very much curious to hear what Iron Maiden can really achieve with this new album. And as I was looking at the info behind the album, especially with the few making of documentary videos surrounding the album before its release, that Bruce Dickinson did say that this is an album that he prefers over the Book of Souls, which was very interesting. And with the two singles that were out before this, of The Writing on the Wall and Stratego, I was really predicting and thinking that this is going to be very different to what the Book of Souls was. This is as a separate mode of musical ability and differences with the main writing with this album when comparing it to the Book of Souls. And this was in the making since 2019, the first album since Virtual 11 to have multiple songs that were written by Steve Harris, though the first album since Power Slave that Dave Murray was not involved with the main songwriting ability with the rest of the band. So I am very curious to really hear what your thoughts are about this album. The first track on the record, the title track Senjutsu, a slow percussive introduction with the drums and begins to deliver very rhythmically. Vocally is packed with the harmonies, nice guitar melodies and the chorus, and hearing some more background synthesizer noises. The structure is not really that expansive with versatility, but it's, to me, on a like way, on a bit of a Brave New World type era in my mind. Though I think that vocally for Bruce, on the bridge after the second chorus, he sounds more strained and doesn't bring in a better dynamic take that works as strongly. Though the opening track and title track sounded very promising as an opener, not really memorable, and comparing it to the other main iconic openers, this is a track that I really do dig a lot. The second track and last single, Stratego, more on a mid-tempo galloping drum beat with a different pentatonic lead guitar beginning. The structure is very consistent in a repetitive direction. It feels like on a bit of a progressive number, but it has a bit of a resemblance with me on a bit of a Somewhere in Time era, strangely. This is a type of feel that was very much like that album onto the chorus, and vocally sounds decent, which I give Dickinson a lot of credit. It's not a very strong number, but I do dig in the instrumentation comfortably with a set of virtuoso and explosive lead guitar works and various changes of the music, which sounded decent. Then we go into the first single on the album, The Writing on the Wall, which I've done an actual listening and reacting to, but after repeating listens, this is an appreciative song for me. This is a bluesy type of mark with the beginning and simple driving beat. It feels different on its arrangement, that in my opinion it works as a grower, and I really do still love the chorus and the wonderful lead guitar works. Very catchy. It doesn't feel pedestrian the more I like the track, and it's one of my favorite numbers on the record. Lost in a Lost World. Now this is where the expansions really begin, with the acoustic introduction with a weirdly chorus flanging effect with the delay for the opening vocals brings in some more atmosphere and a cinematic vibe as the synths were masking themselves with the acoustics and backing vocals. And then as the whole band comes in, it sounds really instant with the change of tone. It brings in some upbeat, rhythmic, groovy sections, very good punchy drumming, and layers of distorting guitars and multiple structures. This is a structure that made me think of Ghost and the Navigator from Brave New World, though at the same time it weirdly made me think of the vein of X Factor. Maybe it could be not like that for you, but though it is progressive, minor changes towards the later half of the track, but I really do like this one quite a lot here. Days of Future Past. Now this is, in my opinion, where the weaknesses come. This is very much not a well different made number. It's very much similar to the previous track, but with some more boosting up faster mode of energy. Made me think on the mid-2000s led era, to be honest. Was decent for what it's worth. It's not one of my main favourites or one of the favourites on the record. For me, one of the weaknesses. The Time Machine, to me, opens really well with a nicely arranged beginning from the guitars working together melody-wise. And I like the reverb tone onto the vocals and strings to build in a lot of mood with the sound, senses of variety that puts me in a bit of Brave New World or maybe Dance of Death era Maiden. Really consistent and dramatic. There's so much melody that I really dig a lot on the album. There's a lot more awesome riffing while the instrumentation drives through. This is a song that I do like over time and as one of my personal favourites with the record. And same goes with the next track on Darkest Hour. Ocean waves to bring in some ambience. The main interplay of lead guitars and bass together. Very clean, darker set. This is less changeable and expansive in a bit of a slower pace direction. And the sound of the band here sound really good. And I do think that this was one of the tracks that really follows up the Time Machine so well. Then we hear, to me, another one of the weaker tracks on the record of Death of the Celts. This is an alike, and I mean alike, sound from Virtual Eleven's song The Clansman, and it feels like a sequel in a way. This is, to me, the most repetitive structure. The first half just does not really go anywhere without bringing in some more original or adventurous points of instrumentation. But the second half, on almost the halfway point of the song, to me was the better point on the record. And I just feel that it was more of a disappointment. It's just a really average track. The second half was just incredibly brilliant with a lot of the musicianship that was connection, more fun and engaging interaction with the rest of the band. But the first half for me was one of the weaker performances of this album. The Parchment opens on a creepy and ominous beginning, on a bit of a marching intro with the sound of strings to make it an impending doom type of vein. It's one of the heavier and menacing sounding numbers on the record. I really think that this is one of the best ones on the record as well, onto the wicked jamming on the solos and a lot of action. To find that the Parchment is one of the other highlights on the record, I think the variety that Maiden wanted to do with this album, to me, mostly works out. But for me, I prefer more onto the adventure and mark of territory and directions of differences with the Book of Souls. The last track on the record, Hell on Earth, again weirdly made me think of the X Factor because of how quiet it was going on with the strings. Made me think on a bit of like Fortunes of War. But as the sound of the band goes straight in, they were just boosting in a lot of presentation. Musically though, was not really that much of an invention, but it still has a lot of stylistic approaches with the drumming and exploding yet passionate guitars, more on the other progressive metal type of sounds. And I find that Hell on Earth, to finish off this album, was very good, but really when you compare it to the other amazing and memorable sounds of other closing tracks that we know and love from Maiden, I feel that this one just kinda lacks a little bit, with not much of a brilliant or a powerful mark of dynamics. But I feel that Hell on Earth, to me, as a finalizing crescendo to finish off the album, was not all perfect, but I really do like the track for what it is. The weaker points on the album, besides some of the tracks, I think Bruce's vocals and performances, he sounded like he was forcing his voice, sounded more weaker. And I know that him and the rest of the band have aged a lot, but I think that this album does not really define enough as one of the best vocal performances from Bruce whatsoever. Though I do admire what he wanted to build and make with this album, and I think that the mixing on this album, in my opinion, is the worst part. The mixing was not very, very good, because comparing it to the mixing on earlier Maiden albums, they were more richer, more crisp, and more of a fuller, bigger sound. But this is more or less like the messiest of mixing sounds with a Maiden album, and it feels like more of a raw sounding album, which if the band wanted to make the album sound this way, then that is no major big issue with me. I very much respect that, but production wise was pretty great all around. It's just that the mixing was the main distraction with this album. Overall, Senjutsu by Iron Maiden, in my opinion, is still a very accessible album, very diverse album, but not at all one of the best or even top 5 ever Maiden albums, though I really do give the band so much credit with what they wanted to make on here. I am curious to know what you personally think of this album in the comments down below. So I'm going to give Senjutsu by Iron Maiden an 8 out of 10. Thank you guys for watching, and I'll keep you guys posted for more videos in the near future.